Good morning. It is 7:42 here on the Mighty 690, and we have joining us on the line U.S. Representative Derek Schmidt, Kansas's 2nd Congressional District, who joins us here. Good morning, sir. How's it going?
Hey, James, good morning. Going well, thank you. Good to be back with you.
Absolutely. Great to have you here. And I know we got a little bit of rain coming down, and while that may not be good news for Neowalla, where it's definitely good news for some of our drought and everything here in Kansas, which people might not realize we do still have some ongoing drought issues.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was talking with a woman in Edna the other day, and she was talking about how her ponds are back down after she was, they were full to the brim earlier this spring. So we'll take the rain. Sorry about that for Neowalla, and sorry about that for anybody that's still trying to get harvest out of the field, but we could sure use the moisture.
That's right. So, hey, I know that, of course, Washington been in the news quite a bit here, especially with the ongoing government shutdown. A lot of folks are probably kind of wondering, well, what is the latest on this? Any light at the end of the tunnel? And then also, as we get further and further into this, what are the impacts on maybe some of these benefits and that sort of thing? Kind of what's an update on this?
Well, it's very frustrating. We're at day 24 here, I think it is, and it's not apparent to me, at least, that there's an end in sight. It's sort of a chicken and an egg problem, because I'm not sure that Senator Schumer and his conference that he pretty well has locked down in the Senate to not allow any of the government to reopen until they get whatever it is they want. And I say it that way not to be dismissive, but because their demands are ever shifting. I mean, they say one thing to the press, they say one thing in private negotiations, they say yet another thing in the bill that they propose and say this is what we want. And it's very difficult to find out how to get to yes when you don't know what yes looks like from the standpoint of the folks that have taken the hostage, for lack of a better phrase, because that's what this is all about. At the end of the day, we were I thought, negotiating in good faith. We had a lot of Democrat support, Republican support for the 12 annual appropriation bills. Things were moving along the way they're supposed to, and then all of a sudden, Senator Schumer decides nothing else. You're not going to extend current funding levels. You're not going to adopt bills with new funding levels. They've defeated the defense appropriation bill. They're going to defeat, I think, some other individual appropriation bills in the Senate. They're not going to let this thing move until they get whatever it is they want, and it's been very difficult to figure out what it is they want. So I don't know what the end looks like on this. I say chicken and egg because part of what the administration has done is try to minimize the real harm to real people all over the country from this shutdown. They've moved money around. They've done things like pay the troops, trying to get law enforcement paid. They've been trying to make sure that benefits continue. They were able to keep the WIC, the Women's, Infants, and Children funding, the food assistance, predominantly. They've been able to keep that going so far by moving some money from one pot to another with some authority that they have. We're coming up on November 1st. It looks like a disruption in SNAP funding, that's food stamps funding. I think that would be a terrible outcome. I think it shouldn't be allowed to happen. There's no reason it needs to happen. We've been working with the administration to see if there are some ways to prevent that from happening. But I guess the terrible irony here is that the more we're able to head off real problems for real Kansans and other people around the country, the more likely it is that Senator Schumer decides he can hold on a bit longer. So it's very frustrating. It's one of those Washington parlor games that we've all grown frustrated with. But I think the only way to get out of this thing is just to persist. We just keep saying, open the government, let's get back to negotiating on a whole bunch of important issues. And I just wanted to.
Sure, and of course, I know we've been talking with some folks who, run our local food banks, and there's some nervousness here with, especially like you already mentioned, the SNAP benefits. I know Oklahoma said, hey, as we get into November, we're looking at trying. We're not sure, what's going to happen as far as trying to fund some of these programs. I know some of our local counties are working on trying to have some contingencies to find more money for some of the WIC recipients. So it is definitely a concern for some of those folks who are on those programs as we do get into the next month, and that some of those funding sources start to run out as well. And I know that like you said, there are some efforts to try to keep those continuing, but this just keeps stretching on, and I think more and more folks realize that maybe it seems like these government shutdowns are not really very effective when it comes to actually getting much done.
Well, I couldn't agree with that more. In fact, we actually have some legislation, if we can ever get back to legislating again, that would effectively end them in perpetuity. It would require that if next year's appropriation bill isn't in place, if Congress hasn't decided here's what's going to happen next year, that you just keep doing what you've been doing. And while that's not optimal, it's better than this. These government shutdowns, I don't know how far they go back. I don't know the history. I remember them back as far as the 1990s. And they have never been a successful tool. I'm not saying that there's never a time that maybe they're inevitable, but it's not a good way of human interaction when instead of trying to do the give and take of negotiation and get what you can and let elections sort things out, you get one faction that's just intransigent and says, my way or the highway, give me what I want right now, or else we're not going to do anything in terms of funding other government operations. It's a bad strategy. I mean, imagine if you tried to do that in your business or in your personal interactions with people or, with your church budget or whatever it is. It just doesn't work. And it doesn't work in Washington either. The difference is you have this enormous sort of chattering class that amplifies the smallest little differences and the smallest little ideas and individual voices, and things look out of proportion. But at the end of the day, it's just common sense. You've got to work together to get things done. And when a minority grabs a hold of everything and says, give us what we demand or we're not going to do anything, it's just a bad strategy. So I'd love to end these once and for all. But first, we got to get out of the one that we're in. And I've started calling it the unnecessary shutdown because it is. We were, as I said, we were making good progress, Republicans and Democrats together, especially in the House, on kind of compromising, working out agreements on overall spending levels and on priorities. We had all 12 of the annual appropriation bills, which is what you're supposed to do, 12 of them. We had all 12 of them out of committee. They each had bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats. We have 3 of those 12 across the House floor and in conference with the Senate. Things looked on track for the system to start working the way it's supposed to work. And then all of a sudden, Senator Schumer decided, for whatever reason, I'm not in his head, I'm not certain what his actual motivations are, but he decided to lock the place down. And to be clear, there are plenty of Democrat senators who want to vote to open the government and get back to the discussions, more than enough to break the filibuster in the Senate and get this going. The problem is that the leadership, Senator Schumer in particular, have really put their thumb on the conference and said, we expect you to toe the line. And only 3 have been willing to break the party line. That's Senator Fetterman, Senator Cortez Masto from Nevada, and Senator King, the independent who conferences with Democrats from Maine. Others will at some point. I would prefer it happen sooner than later so we can get back to doing the business we were sent there to do.
We're speaking with U.S. Representative Derek Schmidt here on the Mighty 690, and wanted to shift gears just a little bit. We've had also dominating the news cycle, especially here in farm radio. Earlier this week here, the President Trump's discussion on the Argentinian beef proposal, of course, trying to perhaps bring in some exports here in order to lower some of these beef prices. Of course, we've been reporting these very record prices at the sale barns, which of course make our producers very happy, but the consumers maybe not quite as happy with some of these prices. And I know you've signed on a letter kind of saying that, hey, well, maybe we should be doing that production here instead of bringing in more exports. Wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Well, markets work, and I don't agree with the administration's, I don't know if it's a decision yet, but with the suggestion that the United States federal government ought to try to manipulate the beef market by increasing exports from Argentina, beef from Argentina to the United States. I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with it not just because of the immediate issue of current beef prices on the shelf or prices for producers at the sale barn or all of those important issues. I don't agree with it because I just don't think we ought to go down this road of the government trying to set prices. I don't think it works well. We should have learned that from all of the disastrous experiments with that in the 20th century all around the world. And that's really what this ultimately boils down to, is a policy decision or a political decision to try to set prices, to try to manipulate prices in the marketplace. Let the market sort it out. Beef prices are high right now. That's true. It's true for consumers. It's true for producers. It's good for producers. It's not good for consumers. But there are lots of reasons for that, including this lengthy drought that has resulted in liquidation of a lot of herds over recent years, and as a result, our herd size nationwide is low. There's less supply. There's still more demand. But while beef prices are relatively high, other prices are not high. I mean, certainly a lot of our commodities prices are very low. I was talking to somebody yesterday, talked about, we're producing some row crops at 2025 input costs, and we're selling them at 1985 market prices, and I thought that kind of summed it up. I was on the phone with the White House the other day after this idea was floated by them of trying to manipulate the beef market with respect to the Argentine imports. And I was trying to explain. I realized I was talking to folks who are very, very bright but don't have any experience in production agriculture. I was trying to explain that, for example, in Kansas, especially eastern Kansas, where a lot of our producers are relatively small or very small, diversified operations that have lots of different things they produce, things have to balance out. And right now they're losing money on row crops. They're losing money on a lot of other animal production, but they're making money on beef, and that allows the overall operation to remain solvent and in business. If the government steps in and squashes down profits, the ability to generate revenue on cattle sales, it's not just about the cattle market. It's about our overall rural economy and the ability of a lot of producers to stay in business. So just keep the government out of it, let the markets work, and we've been conveying that message strongly, and I'm hopeful that the administration is going to ultimately listen to us on this.
Sure, it does seem like there has definitely been a lot of strong words on this from the agriculture side of things, and of course, there's also been the discussion that you touched on this a little bit, that as producers, our input costs have continued to go up. I mean, those have risen. I mean, you look at the price of equipment, you look at the cost of diesel, all these things that go into animal agriculture, and then we still want that cheap beef in the store, the $3 a pound or even less, and maybe that's not really even realistic anymore, as we look at this, and we're kind of used to the prices of everything else going up, but then we have some of our commodities and everything seem to stay the same, like you said, with these some of these 80s prices. And I mean, you look at other things that the government has got into, the dairy industry in specific, and I'm sure that there's some thoughts on should the government be buying all of these other dairy products as well, and how that has impacted things. So I do appreciate your thoughts on that, as we kind of look to the markets and see where it all goes here in the future.
Markets are amazing things, and of course we all want to see prices come down, or at least stop growing rapidly, not just in beef or in food, but across the board. That's the inflation discussion we've been having. But I just don't think the solution to that is for the government to step in and start trying to basically decide what prices look like in the supermarket or in the commodity markets or other markets. I don't think that's a solution to the problem. I don't think it will fix it, and I think it will create lots of other problems in the long term. It's better off to let these markets work, and if there are little blips here or there, we can figure that out. But it's rarely the solution that the government comes in and says, I'm from Washington, we're here.
We're speaking with U.S. Representative Derek Schmidt, sir, and as we wrap up here, I know there has been some discussion here and the stories here this past week of the construction there on the east wing of the White House, and I know there's a lot of different views on all of that, but I was curious if there's anything that you've heard on that whole project, or maybe even gotten to see perhaps walking around on all that construction there at the White House. Just any thoughts on that?
Well, no, I haven't been over that way since all of this started. Perhaps the administration could have handled particularly the demolition in the East Wing a little bit better in terms of preparing people for it and explaining what was necessary and what's going on. It's a construction project. Some comes down for others to go up. That would have perhaps been very helpful, especially given the historic nature of the building and the grounds. Having said that, I do think it's a good thing overall that, assuming this all progresses, there's going to be left as a legacy for future generations a larger, more usable gathering space at the White House The White House is a wonderful, wonderful place. It is relatively small in terms of its gathering and entertaining spaces, and not that that's critical one way or the other, but this will be a real benefit long term for whoever is the occupant of the White House and for all of the American people who will be able to use it over time. So I think it's a good thing it's going to be done in terms of adding the ballroom space. I would have recommended it be done perhaps a little bit more diplomatically to get to this point.
Sure. Well, we'll definitely watch the progress on that. Finally, I know we had our state representative Ron Bryce up in Washington here last week. Did you, by chance, have a chance to talk with him while he was up there?
Yeah, I did. I saw Ron while he was in Washington this past week. We had a chance to visit a little bit, and in fact, there were several Kansas legislators in town about a week ago now, and it's one of the strange little quirks of this government shutdown. The people who give tours of the Capitol and a lot of other places are furloughed. They're not able to work right now, so I actually wound up giving them a tour myself. I can get in because it's our workspace, and so I had a chance to spend time with a few of them, and it was a great opportunity, and we're glad to host them. By the way, anybody else who's coming out from home in the next days until this all gets sorted out, if it's a day I'm in Washington, give us a holler at the office. We're still open and running. We're full staffed. We're trying to help people solve problems that have come up because a lot of agencies are not working at all or at full capacity, and one of those is, to the extent we have time, we're happy to walk folks over and show them the Capitol. We can actually do that. So I had a couple from Burlington in town the other day. They planned a vacation. They got to Washington, and everything was shut. They couldn't do all the things they planned to do, the Capitol, the Smithsonian, and some of these other things. And so they came by the office. I said, well, let me give you my amateur version of the walkthrough, and we had a nice time and hopefully salvage something of their vacation. So we're trying to be helpful in even little ways like that.
Well, that is awesome. I really appreciate it. And, sir, we really thank you for taking the time to talk with us and give us an update on things going on in Washington. Hope you have a great week ahead. We'll look forward to getting all the government back and open. And, again, we just thank you for your taking your time today.
Appreciate it very much, James. Thank you. Take care.
All right. That is U.S. Representative Derek Schmidt, who joins us here every fourth Friday of the month. We do appreciate him taking the time to talk with us here today. 55 degrees right now as we head towards news time.